Hey guys, this is Matt Weaver with Bible Truth Project, and today I have a treat for you. We are talking with Andrew Jones, who is live at Mount Sinai in Arabia. And Andrew, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. This is an absolute treat for us, especially us who are in the States, kind of COVID bound here and unable to get out and see stuff. So this is an awesome, really a special thing for us to see. So thank you so much.
Glad to be here with you virtually and glad to share from the land of Midian.
Yeah, so behind you, if people can see on the video, behind you is actually the mountain and or the lower peak of the mountain and the area where the cave is at, etc. So I guess just to begin with here, tell us a little bit why you got into this and kind of where that journey has gone.
Yeah, so I first learned about this in the early 90s. I was in middle school, and a guy named Ron Wyatt came to Sacramento, California to um, give a one night lecture about his different discoveries and claims. And my father went to it because it was a school night, it was a Thursday night. And so I had homework, and so my father went for me, and he came back and said, "Hey, this guy said he found Mount Sinai and the Red Sea crossing." And so I bought his book. And then right after that, I went ahead and uh, went to looked. I called the operator. I'm sorry, there was no internet back then, and so I called the operator, and they got me in contact with Ron. I called 411. They found his phone number, and and that was like 91 or 92, and that was it was until the late until he passed away. I used to talk to him a lot, and so yeah, that's kind of my story on that. And then in 2016, I first came here on a business visa, and we were able to get in through an invite with a Saudi prince. And so since 2016 up until now, I've been making over 20 trips into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, driving, walking, hiking over 20,000 miles on the ground here. Just try to understand the Exodus, share it with those who can make it out here,
Yep.
and exploring on my own, doing my own videos and whatever. But yeah, that's kind of how I personally got involved in this research.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting and actually kind of shares, I mean, to a degree, a similar story. So this is when I was young too. My dad actually got a hold of some Ron Wyatt um, videos, or had heard about him, and ended up going down. This is probably mid '90s, and met him and talked to him, etc., down in Tennessee. So that's again how we kind of stumbled across the mountain, etc. Of course, later found out about Cornuke and some of the others that were going to the site. But but yeah, it's an absolutely amazing site. Was lucky enough to go there 2 years ago, and I think what really stood out to me when you're there in person compared to some of the videos and stuff that we've seen in the past. Which, by the way, when some of the first videos started filtering back that you shot with the drones and stuff, etc., there at the beginning and some of your first trips, it was so it was unbelievable. It was because Saudi Arabia was so closed off, right? And it's like so hard to get into unless you had an invite or official business or anything like that. So there just wasn't much content out there, and so you shot some amazing 4K drone footage back in those early trips, and just seeing that was just like wow, like totally took it to the next level. Because unfortunately, the guys in the '90s, the equipment just wasn't that good. So to actually see that was just like it really was something. Of course, seeing it in person is much better, but still, it was amazing. But the thing that really stood out to me on the trip to when we were there 2 years ago on the Split Rock, the size of it is way bigger than what you can kind of discern from a photo or a video. It's huge. So anyway,
Yeah. In fact, yeah, on my first trip here in 2016, the Split Rock was my favorite site. That was the most impressive, left the most memories just being there and thinking of the water, the big miracle of the
yeah,
water coming out of that rock, the rivers of water. I've, just seen it in person. I've seen the old, the Caldwell photos and some of the old grainy videos. Again, as
yep,
you said, they didn't have 4K cameras back then, but they
right,
did a great job getting the word out. I mean, it was
Yep.
only their information for
Yep.
so many decades, until we finally were able to get in some good equipment in 2016 in the fall. We brought our first drone over here.
Yep.
It just opened the doors for others to come too. And so I'm so glad you go to YouTube, you'll find a lot of people who work here in the kingdom who are doing the same thing. Like they come out here
Yep.
on their own and they're making videos and uploading it to the channel. So it's great to see all this.
So one of the, I guess, there's several important facts about this mountain that really differentiate it from the traditional site and some of the other candidates that are out there. Number one, and I think it's probably the most important point, and I'd like to hear your comments on it, is the whole Midian connection. Because the Bible clearly states that Moses left Egypt, went to Midian, and was with Jethro in Midian, and stayed there, ended up marrying his daughter, etc. And then when he went back, he brought the children of Israel to the same region. What are your thoughts on the whole Midian connection, some of the discoveries, etc., that you've found in your travels around the area and talking to locals, etc.?
Yeah, you said it correctly. This is probably the most the strong or the strongest line of evidence to where you're going to find Mount Sinai is the Midian connection. Ways around that. They'll say things that the land. But the land of Egypt, it says he went to Midian, like it was a location, a place, not just someone's tent that they moved around in. Midian did not just travel around with Jethro. Wherever Jethro's tent was somebody land of Midian. It was it was a location.
Right.
On top of it, you do find this pottery. There's ancient civilizations. You have some pieces of pottery, maybe some Bedouins, and then you have, of course, the mining activity of the pharaohs. But in regards to like a civilization or a country living down in that area, no, it's a very remote mountainous region. But over here, you have a number of oases. You have their pottery making sites, their mining sites, and the archaeologists do state this is the land of Midian, and so you can't get around that. So if they would just accept that Midian is a location, a very specific area, then you have to then obviously answer the question of, well, how did Moses take Jethro's sheep from this area to Mount Sinai if you're going to put Mount Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula?
Right.
If you put a map up, you can show people that this area is on the eastern side of the Gulf of Aqaba. So how did they get across? There was no Red Sea crossing from Jethro's sheep. They had to go up around the tip of the Gulf of Aqaba through modern Eilat, all the way back down. And then that is where you would is to bring the Israelites back here to worship. It's quite a journey to bring the sheep on for no reason when there's plenty of watering holes and oasis in the land of Midian. And on top of it, you do find explorers from a couple hundred years ago talking about the Bedouins in this area doing this type of migration where it is not a journey from Midian to the Sinai Peninsula, but a journey from a lower elevation to a higher elevation. Mm-hmm. And so that's a seasonal thing that they would do based on the temperature and the weather. And when it gets hot in the summer, they go higher up to the mountains. And guess what mountain range is right near one of the largest Midianite sites of Al-Bada? On the east side of Al-Bada is the Jabal Allah's range with Jabal Maqla and the other peaks that forms this area we believe to be Horeb and we believe to be Sinai. And so it's perfect sense. It's within the range that the Bedouins would have taken the sheep to have gone from the area of Al-Bada up into the mountains of what we call today Jabal Allah's, and for Moses to see the burning bush there on Mount Sinai. You can't get around that. So if you can accept that, then suddenly you're looking at, you have to find a Mount Sinai location near a Midianite settlement that is in northwest Saudi Arabia. And so if you look at all the geography of this area, the best spot, we believe, is the Jabal Maqla area, which we're at the base of it right here. It has the giant plain in front of it, et cetera, et cetera. But to me, this Midianite connection is the strongest piece of evidence to looking for Mount Sinai.
Yeah, and there's also some connections in the ancients. I mean, I think a lot of people think somehow this is a modern invention or a modern thought, but this is obviously it was biblical. But in the New Testament era, you have Paul talking about Sinai and Arabia, obviously in a metaphor that he's giving, but he still names Sinai and Arabia. Later, you've got Philo kind of referencing the region and the highest peak in the mountain, or the highest mountain in the range, or in the region, Midian, being the location of Sinai. And there's a lot of evidence throughout the years. So this is not something that is just a, if you will, a new discovery. There's a chain of evidence. Unfortunately, through time in history and just disconnect, I guess you could say, in civilizations, this information was lost somewhat to the West. And
Yeah.
it was some of those early people that suggested it, and Ron going over in the modern time and getting some videos and stuff, where all of a sudden now we have a site. And a lot of people need to realize it's difficult for Westerners, as far as archaeologists, to get in there to actually do anything. Now they've done some local archaeological digs, etc., but generally speaking, there's not been space or time or resources thrown at doing some archaeology and archaeological digs, in any major sense in the region to find evidence as well. So some of that stuff is, probably forthcoming at some point, and etc. But from your interacting with the locals, like everybody points to this region being the Mountain of Moses. We had some exposure to the locals that live right there. Um, but as far as, and they, of course, all tell us the Mountain of Moses. But what is the general feeling that you get when you're talking to locals as you're driving around the whole region?
Yeah, a lot of people tell you, especially in this general area in front of the mountain, well, even on the about that side, the west side, that Moses and they say the Yehudites or the
Yep.
Israelites came
Right.
through here. It's just something like it's well known in their local tradition, the Muslim tradition here, and they don't. They don't say much about the Sinai, the tourist pilgrim site in the Sinai Peninsula,
Right.
but they do point to this site here as being Mount Sinai. Which really, what's really interesting, back in the early '80s or mid '80s, when Ron came out here in '84, and then he was invited officially back in '85 with David Fazel. Um, David Fazel verifies that Ron was told this by the locals, and the locals told Fazel this too. They said, "Hena Jabal Musa, here is the mountain of Moses." Now, this is before any Ron Wyatt talks, any Ron
Yep.
Wyatt YouTube videos are out there, before Mueller stuff, whatever. Mahoney's films were not out.
Yep.
So where did they get this tradition
Right.
from? This is definitely something that was coming from their information and their history outside of the Western Christian pilgrim site in the
That's
Sinai
correct.
Peninsula.
Yep.
And not even the 1980s you're looking at. If you read some of the older literature of explorers who came through, especially the Hajj route that went down
Hmm.
through El Bada, and nearby is this coastal town they call the Port of Midian. It's the oasis of Magna
Hmm.
that they say is the springs of Moses. There's even a tradition that these could be the 12 wells of Elam, some people
Hmm.
have, and others say it's the coastal camping site after Elam. But at any rate, it was in this area that explorer from the Ottoman Empire time, and I forget his name, but he went through there in the early 1700s. And he recorded that the locals not only showed him these springs of Moses here, but they showed him a rock nearby that they claimed Moses struck that the water came out of.
Hmm.
And so there was a later, like about 200 years later, in the early 1900s, a Czech explorer came through here, and he recorded. He mentions this in his footnotes, and he was a little confused. He was thinking this was the second rock, the one at Kadesh, that
Hmm.
Moses was supposed to talk to.
Yep.
And so he was saying, no, that rock is up in Petra. That's a traditional site of Kadesh, is near Petra.
Yep.
And so he was thinking that the locals had their facts wrong. Well, if you read first rock, the one that Moses struck at Rephidim, and so while Magna is not Rephidim, it is very close to the giant split rock Nicole that's found in the 1990s. And so here again, you have this tradition about 300 years ago of the locals telling Western explorers, or this time it was an Ottoman Empire explorer coming through, that one of the key events of the Exodus story that happened at the last camping site before they camped in front of Mount Sinai at Rephidim, the place where Moses struck the rock, they're telling him this happened in Northwest Saudi Arabia. And this is way before anyone else was out here doing Ron White videos. So this is really interesting to see this type of information, being passed down through generation until you get to now, when you have a lot, the tourists out here and people, they'll show you YouTube videos about it. But definitely, they were not influenced by these, this type of media back, 300 years ago.
Correct. Yep, absolutely. And I was actually, I found it interesting too. Like in our tour guide, there were several locals that we interacted with that were with us. But generally speaking, they didn't have exposure either to our Western Christian, um, uh, I guess how'd you say it, opinions on Sinai, et cetera. And it was kind of like when you bring up that, like, the surprise at the evidence from Moses, they were kind of like, well, of course Moses was here. What do you mean? Like, it's like, how could you not know that Moses, was in this region, etc. And I just thought it was interesting from our Western perspective going there. We tend to think like, hey, have you ever heard of Moses in the area? And they're like, yeah, like, of course. To me, that just confirms the strength of the tradition.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of people that, oh, this is impossible, and blah blah blah. Listen, a lot of times when it comes to these cultures and societies, the verbal, the hand me downs, they have a lot of truth to them. So I think it just builds the case for the mountain, etc. What about this is a question I want to ask you. I know you've talked about it before, but your personal theory about the blackened rocks. I know it's not ash; it's actually a change in the composition of the rocks. But just in your opinion, do you think that's because you've been up on the mountain and seen down the backside, etc.? Is it something that's unique to the top of the mountain in your opinion, or is this it's just something that is volcanic, like some of the other people tend to say?
Well, yeah. So about the rock, I know a couple of people have gone on YouTube and said they could smell or taste the burntness,
Yeah, right.
or others that said they were able to wash off the black. None of those are true.
Yeah,
I've been up there 4 times, explored both the northern and southern ridges. First of all, when you get to the top, you do see, even on Google satellite maps,
yep,
that the basalt layer covers multiple mountains and goes down the west side all the way to other mountains on the west side in Midian. So the question is not, is the basalt the results of God's presence, which you find basalt around the world. The question I think people should focus on is there anything that we can test for that would show that God's presence did physically change the basalt up there? I think the basalt was already there. Now, did the basalt is showing a form of what do you want to call it? Desert varnish, an oxidation level. So this oxidation and varnish, it does happen naturally. So the question would be, did his presence speed up the process or leave some other type of physical change on a molecular level that we haven't tested for? People have tested for the type of rock, and we know it's basalt. But there's a couple scientists who are Christians who said, hey, why don't we test something else and see if there's a change on the outside thin layer that would show something. Again, it's hard to know because God's presence was also at the burning bush, and so the question is that the same type of thing that happened on top of the mountain? The fire and smoke, was it just part of God's presence up there and part of the show for the Israelites, or did it physically cause this so that there was something melting or changing or burning on these rocks up there? And so right now, we do have some lines of research to continue, and we do have a university in the Middle East who has a very what do you want to call it, where they can study stuff like this, who've offered to check out these samples and help us collaborate on this. And so we're going to get some samples and hopefully have something to report back. And again, so when I do sometimes bring rocks back to some friends, special friends, because it's a lot to go up the mountain and come back, and so I do get some that
Yep.
I don't worship it as an idol, but whatever's
Yep.
up there,
Yeah.
those rocks were in God's presence.
Right.
This is Mount Sinai. So just like when you go to the Red Sea crossing, I get seashells or
Yep.
sand, or you go any place on the world and you try to collect a little natural thing for a
Yep.
souvenir. That's how I view it up there. It's there's no radiation. Some people have asked, do you get radiation sickness? Um, Others have said, hey, you should take your shoes off because this is holy ground. Now, I have not tried climbing a tall mountain with my shoes off, and I don't think Moses did that either. He just took his shoes off around the burning bush area. Um, so, no, we believe that the mountain itself is physically holy anymore. Everyone goes up and down, including mules.
Yep.
I do believe God has preserved it as evidence for the Bible,
Yep.
but His presence has left it when they left the Israelites and to go to Mount Moriah and Zion, and something that I tell people that we should worship, or like worship the rocks, because this is something special. But we will follow all the lines of research, and we do have some extra research we want to do that a couple Christian who are scientists suggested that we check out. So we're going to do that.
Awesome. Well, that sounds exciting. I know you've been busy. You've lived over there, kind of studying almost seemingly full time, from what I can tell, for what, a little over a year now, 2 years.
Well, yeah. So I was in Turkey. We have a separate project outside of
Yep.
the Mount Sinai research. And so in 2019, I was in Turkey, and I overstayed my visa when I was there. I misread the visa information. So I got not banned, but they basically say if you overstay your visa, you can't come back for 3 months, depending
Okay.
on how many weeks you stay over. And so in the early 2000, 2020, when I came back in, my friend said, "Hey, we're going to do a better process this time and try to do basically a residency visa so that I could stay longer and not have that issue," because we were really involved in the Ozark project.
Yep.
And then the pandemic hit. So
Yep.
yes, when the pandemic hit, I was like, no, I'm just going to make this my home for now. It's easier to travel in the region in case the borders close. And so yeah, I've been in Turkey since what was it, late February, and then just about a month ago, I came to Saudi Arabia. So I was in Turkey
Nice.
almost 2 years on
Yeah.
the Noah's Ark project. I'm so glad to be back here. It's great to be back exploring Midian again and showing people the sites.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about the websites, et cetera, how people can join trips, et cetera. You do tours, especially this time of the year when it's cooler versus in the summer when it's hot. So give us a little bit more information about that, and then we'll wrap this up.
Well, if people want to come over here we do small group tours, and they want to hear our lectures at the sites and interact with the locals, and just kind of spend a lot more time on the ground and more than most tours do, then they can check out discoveredsinai.com. And so on there, they can go to the tours menu. We have an Exodus tour, and then we also have a Mount Sinai tour. They're both a week long, or 5 days long, but with travel time, it's about a week. And so they can go that way. If they can't make it over on a tour, they can check out our on YouTube, our social media sites on Facebook, Instagram. Just look up Discovered Media, and you will find our videos there. And if they do come over on their own and they don't want to pay for a tour, I've met many people over here who have just showed up, and I've emailed them before and showed them how to get here. So you can contact us through the website, and we can tell you like where to go, where hotel, the hotels you could stay at, where to get your car rental, which wadi to drive down, what Bedouin to say hi to. So we do have friends in there. So we're very
Yep.
detailed in our help, and
Yep.
I have long emails between many people who've come out here, and we're more than willing to help people who don't go on our tours. So it's not a money making thing for us.
Yeah.
It does
Sure.
help us on our research though.
Sure.
And so, but yeah, check out the YouTube channel. That's our main one, and then we do Instagram. But if they're on Facebook, then they can check out our discussion group there. We're in Ask Questions.
Yep. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. I appreciate the time. It's very special for us. So blessings for you for that, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me. Hope that we can do this again in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.